Okay, it's 2 minutes after 1. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to MHPN's May webinar. My name is Xiaohanbao Smith. I will be your moderator today, and we are going to hear about saving Bell Tower, adaptive reuse, community stewardship, and the preservation of a former Seventh-day Adventist Church in Petoskey. Before I turn it over to our speaker, I would like to go over some Zoom items. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box as you think of them. All the questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. And the chat box will be used to share resources or links discussed during the webinar. And if you have any technical difficulties, please also type them into the Q&A box so we can see them. And both the chat box and Q&A box are located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you don't see them, please wiggle your mouse and they should pop up. If this is your first time attending our webinar, we are the Michigan Historic Preservation Network. We support the sustainability and economic viability of Michigan's historic places through advocacy, education, and direct action. We could not do the work we do without our members and volunteers. If you are not a member yet, please consider joining us at www.mhpn.org. If you are seeking AICP credits for this webinar, you will need to log in your credits after this event. I will send this information in chat in a little bit. And if you're seeking AIA credits, you will need to send me your name and AIA number to my email address. I will also send the information to the chat. And our webinars are supported in part by an award from the Michigan Arts and Culture Council and the National Endowment for the Arts. We want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. And it is my great pleasure today to introduce you our speaker, Lindsay Dotson. Lindsay is a historic preservationist, owner, and operator of Belle Tower of Petoskey and GD Placemaking. And Lindsay is also a MHPN board member. We want to thank her for her service. And her bio can be found on our website. I will send the link to the chat in a little bit here. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Lindsay.
Thank you so much. Let's get my presentation going. Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. That was a great introduction, so no need to add to it. And I'll just jump right into the topic of the building that we're discussing today. The Bell Tower project began because someone believed in me enough to challenge me. I had spent my entire career advising others on preservation and redevelopment projects and had recently been part of a team that received a governor's award in historic preservation. And at one point, my business partner simply said to me, "You've been doing this for others for so long. Why not do it for yourself?" That question ultimately changed my life and led to this project. And real quick, I want to note on the images that we're seeing here. So the building on the left, or the photo on the left, is the building before purchasing. You can see that most of the facade had been covered up by trees and shrubs and an awning. And one of the first things that we did back when we purchased the property in July of last year was to get all of that growth away from the building, not only to kind of reintroduce it to the community, but also be able to evaluate some of the conditions that we were inheriting. So it did kind of bring a focus back to the property because a lot of people had overlooked it for years, thanks to the condition it was in, which quickly garnered a lot of excitement and support. All right. So the building is located in downtown Petoskey on the corner of Michigan and Petoskey Streets with a great view of the bay, thanks to it being on a hill of sorts. When I first saw the building, I didn't see a hopeless structure. I saw a long neglected gem. What immediately stood out to me was how much original material was still intact. The siding, the windows, the trim details, and so much of it dated back to 1891, which is incredibly rare, especially in our town. Also, when going up into the bell tower for the first time, it was discovered that the bell still exists, which of course it ended up being the namesake of the building. And despite years of deferred maintenance, the building still felt structurally sound and, of course, full of possibility. Beyond the physical aspects, I also felt a deep emotional connection to the building. In many ways, the building became symbolic of me, something neglected for a little while, LOL, yet strong beneath the surface, still capable of being brought back to life. I think many preservationists understand that feeling. Sometimes buildings choose us as much as we choose them. Others had looked at the property but never pulled the trigger due to the scope of work needing to be performed and site limitations. We had competitive offers on the table, but had developed a relationship with the seller who had appreciated what our intentions were with the building. Relationships matter for sure. So, a little bit of the history of the property. The church was constructed in 1891 as the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and it is listed on the National Register of Historic Places as part of a larger downtown Petoskey historic district. The thing that I didn't know before purchasing this property was how Michigan played an important role in early Seventh-day Adventist history, particularly through Battle Creek, which became a major center for Adventist publishing, health reform, and religious leadership in the late 19th century. One of the movement's most influential figures was Ellen Gould White, a founder and spiritual leader of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Her influence extended far beyond religion and deeply shaped ideas surrounding wellness, nutrition, education, and intentional living. Ellen White directly hired Dr. John Harvey Kellogg to lead the Battle Creek Sanitarium, which later became internationally famous for its health reform movement and ultimately contributed to the founding of Kellogg Cereal Company that many people still recognize today. Ellen White's broader cultural and historical significance is substantial enough that she has been recognized by the Smithsonian as one of the 100 most significant Americans in history. Originally from Maine, she basically crossed the country starting in the 1840s through her death when she was in her 80s, ended up dying in California. But what was unique about her is that she claimed to have visions and dreams and messages directly from God and was a speaker and a writer. And it is said that of all of the things that she's written, she has more than 100,000 pages of content published. What's especially fascinating for Northern Michigan and this building in particular is that Ellen spent time in Bayview here near Petoskey due to health concerns one summer. She contracted malaria and was told that if she came up north, the fresh air were going to help heal her, essentially. And that was a part of a broader movement of people when they were coming to Northern Michigan at the time. They believed that the setting was believed to support healing and recovery. That connection adds a remarkable layer of significance to this building and its regional context, tying Northern Michigan directly into larger national stories about religion, health reform, wellness culture, and community building during the late 19th century. Something else I found fascinating while researching the building was learning more about the broader philosophy behind the Seventh-day Adventist Church architecture. Seventh-day Adventist architecture was never intended to be ornamental. It was deeply tied to theology, health, education, and community life. These churches were designed to function not only as worship spaces, but also as gathering places that supported holistic well-being and community connection. The emphasis can be seen architecturally through abundant natural light, ventilation, modest but dignified materials, and flexible communal spaces. These priorities, heavily influenced by Ellen Goldwhite herself, whose writings frequently emphasize health, nature, simplicity, and intentional living environments, are evident in the building today. As the congregation grew, they relocated to another campus in Petoskey and sold the building to the Church of Jesus Christ and the Latter-day Saints in the 1960s. The building then was modernized. Plumbing was added, a baptismal pool was inserted into the stage. Bathrooms were built in the lower level, classrooms were added, a kitchen, etc. And then in the 1990s, the building was purchased by an attorney who had converted it into office spaces for his practice and a collections agency. When they when they subdivided and added offices to the building, they subdivided the sanctuary, so it was not completely open as its original form when we purchased it. Now, myself and my partner are the fourth owners of this structure. These churches were designed to function not only as worship spaces, but gathering places. And with the natural light and essentially we've gotten the sanctuary back to being open, which is wonderful. It's not the original form of the building yet because we have a drop ceiling that was installed in the 1960s that we have yet to take out because right now it is providing ample insulation that wouldn't otherwise be there. However, with the large windows, it's still extremely beautiful. During any time of the day, we're catching sun from three angles at this point. But if we are able to restore the original layout of the building, that would open up a choir loft and reopen the front of the building into the sanctuary. And so we would have light coming in from four ways. But for now, when you stand in the sanctuary, you can really kind of you really get the feel for the simplicity of the design ethos behind that sanctuary. And with Ellen being from the East Coast, she was born in Maine, even though there's some Queen Anne kind of influences in a lot of the exterior design. When you stand in the sanctuary, it has a very colonial East Coast feel to it, which is really neat to see that influence come into Michigan architecture. So some of the challenges that we inherited, of course, when you take on a building like this that no one else really wanted to deal with, reality sets in pretty quickly. One of our biggest challenges emerged this past January when we discovered that the sewer line connecting the building to the municipal system had been obstructed by tree roots. Even though we got rid of the trees, we did not eliminate that issue. Essentially, the plumbing system became unusable because wastewater had nowhere to properly drain once the ground became frozen and saturated. With the amount of snow and spring rain that we've had this year, it couldn't have happened at a worse time. Fixing the issue requires excavation and installation of a new service connection beneath the sidewalk and the street, which quickly becomes extremely expensive. In the meantime, we have had to rely on a portable restroom and hand washing station outside just so our volunteers and workers have basic facilities on site. So currently, when you step into the building, it really feels like you're going back in time, back to a time before we had modern amenities. We also, of course, have a lot of water damage over the years. I think the roof only has 3 layers and desperately needs to be replaced. There are some foundation issues. We have knob and tube wiring in some parts of the building that are still active. We have gone through the process of getting determined as functionally obsolete for the sake of some tax abatements. But it wasn't hard to get that letter from the assessor because we also are not ADA accessible at this time. And yeah, there are major, very obvious issues that made that designation pretty straightforward when we sought that out. So when we were purchasing the building, we were exploring adding a residential component to the building because housing is such a critical need in our region. Then we discovered that the site has some contamination concerns because of a dry cleaner close by. So that kind of shifted the conversation a little bit in the beginning, not knowing if we could actually build housing units and have people occupy the space safely. We have since had the Department of Energy and Great Lakes and Environment be here to conduct further sample testing on the soil in the basement in multiple spots. And thankfully, the contamination is low enough where it is safe to reside here. So, but during that time of uncertainty in the beginning, we recognized that one of the most economically viable uses for a space like this was likely to be an event or gathering space. What really shaped the project's direction has been the community itself, though. As we began working on the building, because it's on a prominent corner in the downtown, people started to show up and express what they felt Petoskey was missing. A flexible, non-institutional gathering space, not government owned, not affiliated with a church or a college, just a welcoming place for people to gather authentically. Artists, musicians, nonprofit partners, and community members have begun to rally around the project, even helping to physically reopen the sanctuary by demolishing and cleaning up the space. And through that process, the vision has evolved naturally into something much more community driven than we thought it would be. The vision for the Belle Tower is to create a place for meaningful connection. I want this place to feel like a place where people can, come in and feel like they've stepped into a simpler and more grounded version of our society. It's not going to be extravagant. It's not overproduced. It's just authentic. I want it to feel like a place where people can reconnect with creativity and community and with each other. A place where music is truly listened to intentionally instead of becoming background noise. A place where artists feel inspired to create. A place where weddings, performances, gatherings, and celebrations become lifelong memories because the setting itself encourages people to be present. I hope people can simply come as they are and leave feeling a little bit more connected, hopeful, creative, or inspired than when they arrived. In some ways, the building is returning to its original purpose, not necessarily religious in the traditional sense anymore, but still deeply rooted in wellness, reflection, creativity, and human connection. That spirit of gathering, healing, inspiration, and finding light in community still feels very present here. So, because I mentioned we have original materials pretty much throughout the building, we are very dedicated to maintaining those materials as much as possible. The windows and the flooring, the wainscoting, like all of this is old growth wood. If you are a preservationist, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but if you're here just out of curiosity, those elements, those especially since we have eastern white pine as some of the wood in the timbers, the flooring, it's the best that you can get in as far as the density is concerned. and the quality of the material obviously is held up for 130 some years. And even though it needs to be reinforced and fixed in some places, it's still high quality material. Those elements also carry the embodied energy or the soul of the building. As I mentioned before, we hope to eventually restore the original form of the building on the inside, which would open up a choir loft on the second floor. But for now, we are working in stages out of essentially necessity because we have to balance ideals with financial realities and to make this a long-term and sustainable project. To me, successful preservation is not about creating a museum piece frozen in time. It's about respectfully carrying the building forward while retaining the authenticity that makes it meaningful. One of the biggest lessons from this project has been understanding how much zoning and municipal policy shapes whether preservation projects survive. I will say that the city of Petoskey is extremely business friendly and willing to work with developers of all sorts and projects of all sizes. They've been very cutting edge with the way they've approached housing solutions and have supported our project in a number of ways that I'm eternally grateful for. Adaptive reuse often doesn't fit neatly into modern zoning categories because these buildings were constructed long before current parking requirements, accessibility standards, or use classifications existed. For Belle Tower, we've been navigating rezoning efforts and a parking exemption because, as you can see from the image on the left, the property is essentially built out. There's no way that we can add parking, and as it's zoned or as it's mapped currently, if we were to do public assembly as a use, we would be required to add so many parking spaces. So thankfully, they have been flexible and reoriented the map so that our property is included in that exemption because of site limitations. Most of the time with these types of projects, the greatest barrier is not structural deterioration, it's inflexible systems, or other developers might not be familiar with incentive programs and processes that can end up saving money or making them economically feasible. One thing preservationists understand very quickly is that projects like these rarely happen through one perfect funding source. Preservation often requires layered creativity. We're relying on phased rehabilitation, temporary studio and creative space rentals, small events, merchandise sales, volunteer labor, fundraising campaigns, partnerships with other area organizations, and incremental improvements simply to keep momentum moving forward. Honestly, that process has taught me that community investment can become more valuable than traditional financing alone. When people physically contribute labor, donate materials, attend events, or support the vision publicly, they begin to emotionally invest in the building's future too. And that grassroots investment becomes part of the preservation itself and part of the reason why it can succeed. Because when something cool is happening, people want to feel like they can be a part of it, if it's a very small way or in a very involved way. And I learned that through my years of doing downtown development authority kind of work and managing volunteers through community revitalization efforts. The same principles can be applied to a historic property, especially in times post-COVID where people are yearning for connection. And that has been a huge need being filled with this project for sure. The most incredible part of the project has been the volunteers. And we have never put an official call out for volunteers. This has all been through word of mouth, and I've made a lot of new friends through the process of owning this property. See, and it's incredible that the volunteers are artists, musicians, prominent community members, and they are physically showing up to help save this building. It's been incredible. There have been moments during small unofficial events where I've stood back watching people laugh, dance, and reconnect in the space and thought, the building is alive again. I feel like I've already won and the project's not even close to being done. You can genuinely feel the positive energy returning to the building. And what this project has taught me is that preservation projects like these require an army of do-gooders. No one saves a building alone. The true value created through projects like this often extends far beyond the physical structure itself. What gets built during the process is partnership, trust, collaboration, and community identity. This building was originally created because Ellen Goldwhite wanted the people of Petoskey to see the light. She ordered a house of worship to be constructed here after her summer in Bayview. And I believe Belle Tower can continue serving that purpose today as a place where people find creativity, inspiration, connection, and joy. Some lessons learned. Um, so I'm a graduate of the Historic Preservation Program at Eastern Michigan University, and a shout out to Dr. Ted Ligabell. One of the first things I remember when I started the program there back in 2010 was that he told our class, who you know is everything in this career. And clearly that can be applied to most professions, but it has rang true again and again throughout my life. And my involvement with the Michigan Historic Preservation Network since then, so 16 years ago, has really solidified that that is true. Who you know is essentially you can have chance encounters. You have better opportunity to partner with people of similar views and practices. You can help each other. For example, with our window restoration, we're most likely going to be doing some public workshops so we can help train people in the trades in Northern Michigan so that they can better treat some of the historic properties that they're dealing with. Because we do have a lack of skilled trades people, generally speaking, in the country. And there's such a demand for redevelopment and new construction in our area right now that this is a crucial time to kind of get ahead of some of that. Through the process of trying to reactivate the space in temporary ways while we figure out zoning and getting our occupancy permit, I've learned a lot about how certain languages, when it comes to building code and zoning, can be interpreted differently. And we've had small events so far where everyone's signing a waiver acknowledging that they're coming into an active construction site. And we don't even have public facilities that are suitable for hosting events, but people still come out and they're enthusiastic and supportive, despite the fact that we're not even close to being ready to host. And that's been really interesting to navigate, but helps us learn lessons along the way. Over the next few years, we're essentially having to spend a ton of money on this place. And so we have studio rentals happening in the lower level. The rehabilitation is going to happen in phases just because it has to go that way. And people are already starting to make memories here. Artists already feel inspired here, and community members are supporting one another here. If this building can help people feel connected and hopeful again, even briefly, then I think the preservation effort will have been worthwhile. I especially and some like closing thoughts. I want to encourage other preservationists to dream big for themselves. For so long, many of us have existed primarily as advisors, advocates, planners, consultants, or historians helping others execute transformative projects. But preservationists can be developers too. We understand place, we understand story, we understand materials, authenticity, and community impact in ways traditional development models often don't. And I think our field needs more preservationists willing to step into development roles, even when it feels intimidating. If someone like me can make a dream like this happen, you could too. You don't need unlimited money or institutional backing to begin. What matters is creativity, persistence, authenticity, and the willingness to invite others into the process. If you get creative enough about how a project is done, what gets built during the process can become stronger and more meaningful than the building itself. And I am going to go to my thank you slide to introduce you to being able to follow us either via Instagram, Facebook, our website. We have a blog. Information about event rentals is there, as well as ways to donate. We have merchandise that we sell as a part of our fundraising efforts. That merchandise was created by a local artist here in the building who does screen printing and other fun things like glow shirts. So I encourage everybody to follow along, subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated with things. And yeah, I guess it's time for questions.
Thank you, Lindsay, for your presentation and taking us through your project. It's really exciting. And let's jump into our Q&A. Okay. First question. From whom did you buy the building?
I bought it from Garrett Beck, who was the attorney that owned it.
Okay. And next question. How much damage had been done to the wood building by the heavy overgrowth of vegetation?
There's quite a bit of damage on the facade thanks to tree branches kind of brushing against some of the wood, especially the trim above the eyebrow windows that you see there on the top. Um, so we're going to have to unfortunately kind of redo all of that because it harbored a lot of moisture against the building, and there are also foundation issues that were created by a lot of that growth. So maybe it was for privacy purposes. I'm not sure why those trees were put there to begin with, but happy to see them gone so we can start fixing what they did.
Okay, thank you. Next question. So the building is on a very steep hill. Has that created any erosion or drainage issues?
Not the hill itself hasn't really been a cause of that, thankfully. The way our lot is positioned, it kind of you can see from the side better, but there is a slope down towards the front of the building as far as the grade is concerned. And I feel like because we're kind of towards the top of this section of the hill, because if you're familiar with Petoskey, you know there's more hill beyond us, but we're at a point where I feel like we've kind of benefited and not had as much water issues because we're towards the top of it. But yeah, thankfully that has not been an issue. It's just been rotting roof and structural members, unfortunately, that have done most of the damage. So.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Has the city of Petoskey been helpful with your project? They certainly deal with a lot of historic commercial and residential buildings in the city, but each project is different.
Yes. So one way the city of Petoskey has supported our project, which I can't thank them enough for, is through a program through the Redevelopment Ready Communities program through MEDC, where because the city of Petoskey is RRC certified, they have an allotment of technical assistance services that they are able to give out to different development projects. And our project actually benefited from this via structural engineering. We actually just had them on site last week, and that is $15,000 worth of work and assessment that will not come out of our pockets directly. Of course, indirectly via tax dollars can be, yeah, argument can be made, but essentially it's money that the state allots to these communities for being redevelopment ready, and it is a great service that I've been pushing my entire career out to small developments like this, because it is extremely helpful, especially in these beginning stages when you're assessing the safety of a structure and trying to figure out how to best reorient things so that it can be usable for everybody and also safe. Even though it was built as an assembly space, when it converted into that office use, there were some things that happened, like cutting into structural members for HVAC purposes and things like that, that we're slowly fixing. But soon we'll have an official report from WJE, the structural engineering firm that we're working with, so that we can formally address these issues. And that's all thanks to the city of Petoskey. We've also I mentioned a tax abatement. That is something that Petoskey has assisted with through which OPRA, obsolete properties rehabilitation. I can't remember what the A stands for. But essentially it's a tax abatement to help these types of properties that are functionally obsolescent have a bit more of a leg up in the beginning, since so much work has to be done to bring them back into current code compliance. So they've also been extremely helpful with us exploring our sewage issue in ways that they didn't have to be, and that it didn't cost us a thing. So big thanks to the city of Petoskey all around. They've been incredible, incredibly supportive of us and so many other important projects that are happening right now. So,
Oh, great. Thank you. Next question. Has your banker been receptive to your plans?
you say the banker?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. And I will say that financing and insuring this building in the beginning was a bit of a challenge. The benefit, I think, to getting that loan was we worked with Honor Bank, which is based in Honor, Michigan, close to Traverse City, and they've been kind of specializing in these types of loans. Thankfully, my business partner has some other assets that we could borrow against that I wouldn't have brought to the table alone. So that certainly helped. But even when it came to insuring the building, because it is so functionally obsolete, many companies were quoting us extremely high numbers until we cornered the insurer that used to insure the building when the person that had it, that sold it to us. Essentially, we were like, if you insured it for him, you should insure it for us. And that's been a landscape, insurance, generally speaking, that has changed a lot in recent years, and not in a positive way for preservation projects, I would say. But thankfully, we have those bases covered. It just took a lot of effort in the beginning. So.
Oh, thank you. Next question. As a gathering place for the community of Petoskey, have you explored adding food and beverage services?
Not officially, because we have a lot of amazing restaurants and drinking establishments already in the downtown and in the broader area. And essentially, getting into being licensed to sell alcoholic beverages. It's a major investment that comes with a lot of regulation that we don't necessarily have to pursue because if, for example, we're having an event or if someone is renting the space for a private event, there is a such thing as catering licenses that allow licensed operators to come on site and sell their product. And that takes the legal responsibility away from us and also requires less of an investment. Maybe someday when we get to a point where we're not pouring all of our money into the building itself, we could explore that. And it would most definitely be a redevelopment liquor license versus a traditional one because of the amount of money that we're investing in the property. But I don't think that it's necessary to introduce those uses, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to have them present. It's just going to be, not managed by us. Special events, having, private chefs or, things like fancy dinners and things like that can happen here without the licensing. To have a certified commercial kitchen and things like that, because those things do exist in the community elsewhere. And thankfully, we're all kind of aware of those resources so we can point people in the right direction when that need arises. So,
Cool. Next question. Is there any ongoing relationship with the Bayview Association?
actually, yes. Probably today, um, I'll be dropping off, and this is just beginning as far as the historic relationship between there and here in this building. Um, I want to talk more about that story eventually and make that a better known situation. So the way we're starting that is we're partnering with Grandpa Shorters, which is a retailer downtown who also manages the gift shop at Bayview Association. And they're going to be selling handmade bracelets that connect the thread of history per se. Between here and there. So essentially, proceeds of those bracelet sales are going to go towards the restoration of this building and preserving the legacy of Ellen Gold White. So yeah, we still want to tell that story a little bit better. And eventually, I think we're going to have some historic like interpretation panels or a historic marker or something so that we can more broadly share that significance. So,
Okay, thank you. And there's a comment from Rebecca Savage. So this is a super awesome project and very excited that you took this on. And let's go to the next question. Um, so could you talk about your adherence to the U.S. Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation? What were the toughest parts?
I would say it's for with this property, that's it. I know it sounds strange coming from me, uh, but it's the easiest part because we have so much original material intact. The form, it's essentially looks exactly the same as it did, except for the front doors and the steps. And there's a lean-to addition that appeared on the side of the building, probably in the 60s or 50s, I'm guessing. But those are the only changes that really occurred to the outside of the building. So it's easy because we're keeping what we have that's in good shape, replacing what needs to be replaced with the same type of materials. And it turns out there's a lot of very skilled carpenters in Michigan that are willing to work on these types of fun projects. So we have outside of the roof replacement, we're going to have a lot of cedar shakes that need and shingles that need to be replaced just because of wear and tear. But yeah, to me, that's the easy part is adhering to the Secretary of Interior's standards because it's the ethos that I've I've lived by my entire career. So no need to replicate or reintroduce elements. I think the only thing that's actually missing is the chimney cap. There was never an outward display of like there were no crosses on the outside of the building. It's truly just kind of a time capsule, which is pretty cool. So.
Thank you. Next question. What kind of fire suppression system does a building have? And heating, ventilation, and air conditioning?
So right now, there's no fire suppression system, so that's going to be a thing that will be an investment. Um, the building was built on, so I have a description from the Seventh-day Adventist publication journal thing where they have minutes from all of their meetings, the general conference in Battle Creek. And when it was constructed, they had a full basement dug underneath it. And it had for back then a coal powered fired forced air furnace. Forced air in the 1890s meant it essentially rose through the floor. But back that was, that was great technology for the time. I still have the coal chute on the side of the building so we can tell where the furnace used to be. And some of the old vents holes are still in the floor that we've had to patch as we're making it more structurally sound. But yeah, right now we have the newest thing in the building is the furnace. So that was installed in 2022, I think. And no air conditioning because thankfully it's pretty breezy up here on this hill. One of the reasons why people used to come up north, it was because of those breezes. So we will eventually be putting mini splits into the sanctuary to ensure that it's comfortable for people that are here for events. But so far, the natural systems that kind of come with the location of the building and its age are holding up well and keeping it cool. So.
Hey, next question. Have you found an interesting graffiti in the building? And somebody had a comment that they heard that you had found a room full of dolls.
Yes. I almost put a picture of that in the presentation, but didn't want anyone to be frightened, I guess. And I'll exit out of here just for the sake of. Okay. So anyway, graffiti, I have found a couple of things that were interesting underneath layers of like paneling that we've been removing from the building on the inside, where people wrote like how the room would be divided back in the 1890s. Because there is a description of how they would separate the room, and I'm not sure how, like what kind of mechanisms they use to divide the spaces. But like one side of the sanctuary would be where Sunday school was occurring. They didn't use the basement back then. I think it was just utilitarian at the time, and maybe for storage. So there's a couple of random drawings going up into the bell tower on the walls, but no like names or anything that really reveals kind of who was here. So I guess everyone has been pretty respectful when it comes to that sort of thing in the building.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Did the local religious community have any feelings about the property changing uses or transforming a religious use building to a secular public use?
I have not heard a peep from anyone that is concerned in a negative way about that. I've talked with the current pastor of the Seventh-day Adventist Church that's now on Howard Street over by our college. And my primary focus was looking for any sort of historic photos and things like that. That was the intent of the contact, but everybody has embraced this change as a positive one, mainly because when the building was occupied by the prior owner, it wasn't necessarily open to the public. And so I think the idea of welcoming the community back into this space and making it a place that, it just is a third space per se, is being received well. No concerns about the religious and secular kind of differentiations at this point. So.
Okay, cool. Um, did you have to go before the Historic District Commission for this project?
No, because Petoskey, we have National Register districts, and we have some properties that are listed individually, but we don't have a local historic district yet. I know that that is something that is being worked on. They are also working on becoming a certified local government, and so. But yeah, no reviews for this building as of yet because they're still working on that.
Hey, and have you worked with an architect on this project?
Yeah, so we're engaged with Quinn Evans, which is a pretty prominent and well-known firm at this point. And the work that the structural engineers did last week, as far as the Matterport 3D scans and measurements, and just all the collection of data that they were focused on is also going to feed into what Quinn Evans can do for us when it comes to some of the things we need to figure out, like adding a bathroom or two to the main level, and where do we make space for that? How do we become ADA accessible without a giant ramp in front of the building and things like that? So, yeah, we'll be working with the best of the best, and Michelle Smay is one of the architects that I've talked with the most, and she's known for her work on lighthouses in Michigan. And I love that she gets to work with us on this project because we have a tower that when you're up in it, very much feels like you're going into the lens room of a lighthouse. And so, we know that there are some reinforcement actions that we need to take for that space as well. That bell up there weighs, I don't know how many tons, but it's heavy and it's just solid. So it'll be important that we have the right team on that. So we're excited to work with them.
Okay, cool. I think we have one last question. When are you going back to your EMU preservation program and give a preservation to the students about this project? And it would be very inspiring.
I would love, I would love to do that anytime, Nancy or Dan or Matt, anyone, if you want to invite me, or maybe Preservation Eastern president, more than happy to make an appearance and inspire students for sure.
Cool, very cool. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for your presentation and sharing with us about your project. And we look forward to hearing more about it as you continue your work. And thank you, everybody, for participating. And this webinar is being recorded. The recording will be available on our website, and you will also receive an email when it is available in the probably next couple of days. And just a quick announcement about our next webinar. It is scheduled for July, not June. It's July 30th. And I just sent the link, registration link to the chat box. It is the Epic Stained Glass of Metropolitan Detroit. And it will be 1 o'clock on Thursday, July 30th. Hope to see you all next time. Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.